Welcome and hello. This is a lesson in WRIMS, and in this lesson, I'm going to be covering the objective function value as well as the main WRESL file. All right, so what I have on the screen here is my WRIMS interface. I've already loaded up the project L7 for lesson 7. What you see here is the launch file, and then I have a couple of directories in this Project Explorer. You can expand just by clicking on the arrows. There's a DSS directory with my DSS files, and then inside this run directory, I have my main WRESL file, and then inside this system directory, we have files for the date variables, decision variables, and the constraints. So we've talked about these in lessons 5 and 6, and now we're going to talk about the objective function value in the first half of lesson 7, and then in the second half of this lesson, we'll talk about the main WRESL file right here. We don't have an objective function value yet, so that's where we're going to start is by creating that file. And I'm going to just add that file as a .wresl file inside my main system directory. How you have your directories set up is sort of up to you, but you just need to make sure that if one file is referencing another file, that you need to make sure that you're going into the right file folder structure. Okay, so to add a file, I can just right click on the directory I want to put the file in, new, and then file. And then right here, I just want to type in or paste in the file name. It's going to be called objectives.wresl. You may call it something else like weights or objective weights or system objectives. That's up to you. Finish. And then boom, here it is, objectives.wresl. And it actually opened up a tab right here in my main window with IDE selected. So I can go ahead and just type in my objectives right here, which is going to be a combination of the decision variables I want to maximize and the weights that I want to assign to each decision variable. In fact, let's break out the WRESL Plus language guide. I'm on page 19 here, where it talks about the objective function statement. The LP solver will try to find one feasible solution that maximizes the objective function value composed of decision variables and their coefficients, as well as of course, the other constraints that are involved in the program. It also goes on to say that the uniqueness of the optimal solution is not guaranteed. It's also possible that no feasible solution is available. And it also mentions maximize right here. So if you happen to be running a minimization optimization function using WRIMS, you're going to want to basically flip the sign of the cost coefficients and then also of the objective function value. All right, we're not going to be doing that here though. So here we have the objective function value. Down below, it gives an example. So you want to use this keyword objective and then the name of the objective. And then after that, you want to list out the different decision variables in these brackets where the first term is the decision variable itself, comma, space, and then the second term here is going to be the weight. So the higher the weight, higher priority, and that is going to encourage the LP solver to increase the value of whichever decision variables have the largest weight. So let's go ahead and see that in action. I'm going to paste in my code here for the objective function. It's going to be called OBJ. Again, it may be called something else. I only have one particular objective, and that's to maximize the value here of this variable D24, which is the diversion from node 2 to node 4. And I put a weight of 100. It doesn't really matter what the weight is as long as it's positive, because it's the only factor here that I'm trying to maximize. If I had other terms, I would just go comma and then open bracket, and then this would be the variable name, comma, and then the weight, whatever that is. So I'm not going to do that now. We can look into that in later lessons. All right, so that is the objective function. What we want to do now is edit the main WRESL file, which is right here, main.wresl. If you're not sure where your main WRESL file is, you can come to the .launch file, right click, and then come down to run as, and then run configurations. And then the launch file right here, whatever the launch file is called for the loaded project, you're going to see the main WRESL file listed. It's in the run directory and then main.wresl. So this was the file I was looking at before. But if you're ever unclear as to where that WRESL file is, boom, this is how you can look it up. Okay, so let's open up that file. So I'm just going to double click. And it looks like it opened up in my Notepad++. So I'll bring that over to the screen right here. This is the main WRESL file. This is where we need to actually write out the main code for the LP simulation to run. Back to the WRESL Plus language manual. I'm on page 5 now. This is where it talks about the overview. At the beginning of the third paragraph, it talks about that main Russell file right here. The main Russell file must contain the model and sequence statements that describe the constraints to be included in the particular simulation and the order in which the model should be solved. It also talks about including include statements and so on. And if we scroll down to the top of the next page, it gives an example here where we have the different cycles that are defined, the name of the model, as well as the order. So first goes first, second goes second. They may not be called that, but they are here. So here's model 1. It'll execute first, and then model 2 is below it. Within model 1, we see all of the contents just written in directly. We don't have any include statements, or I guess there's one right here, but it starts off with the state variables, which is I01, which refers to a time series. Then we have decision variables, and then we have constraints, and then ultimately we have an objective. Now you can also reference all this text via the include statement, which is what it's doing right here. And that's what we're going to be doing for our example in this lesson. The include is discussed on page 12 I have written. So here's the include statement. You may include other WRESL files by inserting the include statement. Include and then the relative path to that .WRESL file with a couple examples right here. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. On the screen right now is my main Russell file, and then boom, I just pasted in the code. So I have the keyword sequence. The one and only cycle is going to reference the model called base first. And then here is a list of the different .Russell files that I want to load and run into the LP solver in order. We start with the state variables, inflows and demands. That was covered in lesson 5. After that, I have the decision variables and the constraints. That was covered in lesson 6. And now in this lesson 7, we already worked on the objective function value, as well as talk about this file we're editing right now, which is the main Russell file. So that's all I had for this lesson. What we do in the next lesson will be to actually run the model and look at the results.